The gold standard is coming back. The Brics countries are going to release a gold-backed currency to challenge the dollar's dominance as the world reserve currency. Dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria. Not so much. Sorry, guys, but the reporting on this Brics gold-backed currency story is getting beyond nutty, and it's time to put a whole bunch of cold water on this story. We're going to talk about where this story came from, how it's gotten a little bit out of hand, why is Brics trying to do this, why did we undo this, and why doesn't everybody do it? See, going back on the gold standard sounds like a great idea, but it turns out in practice, it's really, really hard. First, let's look at where did this story come from? Now, as far as I can tell, the latest version of this story all started on July 3rd when the Russian embassy in Kenya released this tweet. The Brics countries are planning to introduce a new trading currency which will be backed by gold. More and more countries recently expressed desire to join Brics. They go on to link to this article in foreignpolicy.com. Now, yes, this is an official Russian government Twitter account. See the great check mark up there? Thanks, Elon. But it's the Russian embassy in Kenya. This is not the Ministry of Finance or the Department of Who's What's This. It's an embassy, and it's a tweet. But it's not just a tweet from the Russian embassy in Kenya. It's also in Russia Today. Now, this is an English news channel, but this is Russian state-affiliated media. And 2 days after that tweet from the Russian embassy in Kenya, RT put out this report. Let's listen.
The Brics group is set to introduce a new currency backed by gold, in contrast to the credit-backed US dollar, with countries lining up to join the growing initiative.
The Brics countries are planning to introduce a new trading currency which will be backed by gold. More and more countries recently expressed desire to join Brics.
The decision comes a month ahead of scheduled alliance summit in Johannesburg, South Africa. 41 countries.
Did you catch it? Sure. This is Russia Today. This is Russian state-affiliated news media. But what did they do? They reported the same story, but the source of the story was that same tweet from the embassy in Kenya. So even at this point, all we have really is a tweet from the Russian embassy in Kenya. But wait, it's not just the tweet, and it's not just the Russia Today story that's linking back to the tweet. We've got it in Kitco, too. Russia confirms Brics will create a gold-backed currency. Now, this is on Friday, July 7th, a few days later, but here's another article talking about the same story. Now, according to Kitco, they're saying the gold market could see new bullish momentum as the world could see a new type of gold standard. Friday, according to state-run RT, the Russian government has confirmed that Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, also known as Brics nations, will introduce a new trading currency backed by gold. The official announcement is expected to be made during the Brics summit in August in South Africa. You see what happened there? According to state-run RT, this article in Kitco is just referencing the previous video that I played you from Russia Today, and that Russia Today video is just referencing the tweet from the Russian embassy in Kenya. So still, the only actual source we have is a tweet from the embassy in Kenya. Oh, but wait, here we go. Here's another one. Benzinga.com. Brics gold-backed common currency, a shock to global fiat money system, says economist, as Russia confirms launch in August. Russia confirms launch in August. Whoa, it's confirmed then. There it is. The Brics countries could soon launch a viable alternative to the US dollar. Russia confirmed this week. What happened? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, a coalition of nations going by the moniker Brics, is set to introduce a new currency backed by gold, Russian English news channel RT reported. Once again, another article referencing the RT story that references the Twitter story. This is circular reporting. Every article circles back to the original source being this tweet from the Russian embassy in Kenya. Everything I just showed you, the Russia Today video, the Benzinga article, the Kitco article, it's all based on this tweet. Now, I just want to add, this article links to foreignpolicy.com, which is an American website, and this line is taken directly from that article in foreignpolicy.com. The Kremlin's habitual use of lies as an instrument of statecraft offers grounds for skepticism about anything Russia says. Can you appreciate the irony here, guys? We've got a tweet from the Russian embassy in Kenya talking about this gold-backed currency that links to an article that says the Russian government is liars, and then the Russian state-affiliated media is echoing that tweet, and then Western websites are taking that Russia Today video that talks about this tweet, that mentions this article that says Russia is liars, and everybody is repeating it like it's a fact. At the end of the day, it's a tweet from a Russian embassy in Kenya linking to an article that says the Russians are liars. Maybe that's why the gold chart looks like this, despite a story that says half the world's population is going back on the gold standard. Don't you think that might result in at least a little bit of upward movement in the gold price? Not according to this chart. Now, I have no doubt that the Brics countries are on a mission to replace the dollar as the dominant world reserve currency. That's become known as an exorbitant privilege. It's allowed the United States to run seemingly endless deficits and spend ridiculous amounts on their military. It's a privilege that the Brics countries want for themselves, and they've already started moving in that direction. In fact, the whole point for the Brics alliance was to dethrone the dollar. And without a doubt, the Brics countries are moving in that direction. Check this one out in Bloomberg from back in March. Russia says their gold hoard grew as the West imposed sanctions. Central bank holdings rose 1 million ounces over the past year. So the Russian central bank is buying up gold like gangbusters after the sanctions that followed the invasion of Ukraine. But wait, there's more. China's doing it too. This one in Bloomberg from July 7th. China's central bank boosts gold reserves for the 8th month. PBOC holdings rise 23 tons in June, taking the total to 2,330 tons. So China is buying gold hand over fist too. Surely this means that there is a gold-backed currency coming, right? Well, no. It just means that Russia and China are buying gold. That's all that means. Maybe Russia and China do plan on releasing a gold-backed currency. Maybe they don't. But for right now, all this means is they're buying gold. But they're not the only ones. Check out this one in Kitco from June. Poland's central bank buys another 19 tons of gold, pushing reserves to record levels in May. So Poland is buying gold too, but they're not a Brics country. Does that mean Poland is going to launch a gold-backed zloty sometime soon? Probably not. It just means Poland is buying gold. And Switzerland saying, hold my beer, they're buying gold too. Swiss central bank reports a $4.8 billion increase in the value of their gold holdings from back in April. I doubt there is any plans for a gold-backed Swiss franc anytime soon. It just means the Swiss are also buying gold. So now that we've established that the entire basis of this story is flimsy at best, it's really just a tweet from the Russian embassy in Kenya. Let's talk about the reasons why I don't think Brics is going to do this, at least not anytime soon. Now, yes, the gold standard is a great idea, and if you're trying to dethrone the dollar as the king of the world, the gold standard is a great way to do it. But like everything, it's easier said than done. And one of the easiest ways to understand why it's going to be so hard for Brics to adopt a gold-backed currency is to look at why the U.S. abandoned it in the first place. And while everybody blames Richard Nixon for taking the United States off of the gold standard, and he was the person who actually pulled the trigger on that, the man directly responsible, in my opinion, is this guy, John Maynard Keynes. He's a British economist, and he is the father of Keynesian economics. And besides being known for ruining everything it touches, one of the principles of Keynesian economics is the misguided belief that governments can and should intervene in markets in order to mitigate fluctuations in the economy. In other words, governments can make recessions obsolete just by cranking up their spending every time the economy turns south. And unfortunately, this economic philosophy permeates the central bankers around the world and is largely responsible for the situation that we're currently in with debt bubbles as far as the eye can see. Now, one of the first examples of Keynesian economics being put into policy in the United States came under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It was one of his first acts as president of the United States, and it's known as Executive Order 6102, issued on April 5th of 1933. Executive Order 6102 made the private ownership of gold in the United States illegal. This is when the government said, surrender your gold. Don't worry, we'll give you $20.69 for every ounce of gold. And that was the price of gold at the time this executive order was issued. And then once the government had all the gold, they went ahead and changed the value of gold to $35 an ounce. And in doing so, the government effectively stole 41% of American savings. They ordered them to sell their gold to the government, and then once the government had it all, they changed the price. You see, FDR needed millions and millions of dollars to finance his New Deal policies, i.e., runaway government spending, which he felt was necessary to bring the United States out of the Great Depression. Again, this is basic Keynesian economics, the government intervening during times of economic turmoil. But the United States was on the gold standard, so he couldn't just print the money, not until he had the gold to back it up. Now, the United States was still technically on the gold standard when this happened, although to the average American citizen, the US dollar was no longer redeemable for gold. So this started the decline of the U.S. off the gold standard. But it was several years later in the 1960s that sealed the fate of the U.S. dollar. This is the M2 money supply. This is all dollars in circulation in the United States from 1960 until August of 1971 when Nixon finally took us off the gold standard. And you can notice here the supply of dollars in the United States more than doubled during that decade. But the dollars were supposedly all backed by gold. The American stockpile of gold didn't double during the 60s, but the number of dollars representing that gold did double. See, the United States needed money to fund the space race, to fund the Cold War military buildups, the war in Vietnam, and of course, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. In other words, endless wars and expansion of social entitlements signed the death warrant of the U.S. dollar as backed by gold. Now, all the while, the United States was running at a massive balance of payments deficit with our trading partners in Europe. And a balance of payments is basically the difference between all the money entering and exiting a country over a defined period, such as a quarter or a year. Now, while the U.S. money supply was expanding, we were sending those dollars overseas as we were buying things. And dollars started to pile up in countries like Italy, France, Germany, Switzerland. Now, under the Bretton Woods Agreement, the United States was holding all of those countries' gold, and the dollars that those countries were holding were redeemable for gold. So as these countries started to accumulate more and more dollars, and they started to notice, hey, United States, the number of dollars in circulation is rising very quickly. We're starting to doubt whether or not you guys have the gold. And one by one, our trading partners in Europe started to demand their gold back. Billions of dollars worth of it. Countries like Germany, Italy, Switzerland all started to demand their gold back from the United States. They started to redeem their dollars at the gold window. It was effectively a bank run on the US dollar. And so the story goes, things got so bad that the French sent a battleship to New York Harbor to demand their gold back from the United States. Now, that story was way overhyped in the press. They made it sound like the French were threatening to blow up New York if they didn't get their gold back. It wasn't even a battleship that they sent. It was actually a cruiser. This is the boat that they sent, the Océan. It was a training ship. It wasn't even in active service in the Navy at the time. The ship was sold for scrap a year or two later. But they did send a warship, at least a slightly decommissioned one, to pick up the gold. And ultimately, that ended in August of 1971 with Richard Nixon going on TV and announcing that he would temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. That was over 52 years ago, and that temporary suspension of the gold window is still temporarily in place. Now, the stated reason Richard Nixon used for temporarily suspending the gold window was to defend the dollar against the speculators. But what he really needed to do was print money to pay for the social programs of the Great Society and the runaway defense spending, namely the Vietnam War. It was runaway government debts and deficits that killed the gold standard in the United States. It wasn't speculators, it was Keynesian economics, government interventions in free markets in order to try to prop up the economy during downturns that ultimately sealed the fate of the gold standard in the United States. And that's one of the reasons why I really doubt that Brics is going to launch a gold-backed currency, at least a true gold standard currency, anytime soon. Because virtually every single Brics country is currently involved in some kind of economic crisis or debacle that very closely mirrors all the reasons the United States was forced off the gold standard. Take Russia, for example. They're involved in a war of attrition in Ukraine that's very similar to our involvement in Vietnam. Well, if Russia is going to continuously pour men and material and cannon fodder into this war, then they can't just print money in order to pay for it, not if they're on a gold standard. Likewise, China is in the midst of a property bubble that they're probably going to try to print their way out of. That's hard to do if your currency is backed by gold. Not to mention they've got their sights set on Taiwan, see also Vietnam War. Now, if you're still not buying my skepticism and you think the BRICS countries are about to release a gold-backed currency any day now, well, listen to their own words. BRICS Bank CFO sees no move anytime soon toward common currency. Dated July 5th, just 2 days after that tweet from the Russian embassy in Kenya, they said this: the new development bank, a financial institution created by the BRICS bloc of emerging markets, doesn't have any immediate plans for the group to create a common currency, its vice president and chief financial officer said. This is the VP and CFO of the bank that was created for the expressed specific purpose of dethroning the US dollar is saying we're not going to release a common currency anytime soon. And by the way, that is the same Brics New Development Bank that's behind this story from mid-June. A bank China built to challenge the dollar now needs the dollar. How Russia's war in Ukraine paralyzed the Brics New Development Bank. Meanwhile, the Brics Development Bank is fighting for its very survival, threatened by its own reliance on the U.S. currency. Soon after Russian troops marched into Ukraine in February of 2022, the bank froze all new lending to Russia to assure investors that it was complying with Western sanctions. However, Wall Street quickly became wary of lending to a bank nearly 20% owned by Russia, and Xi's deepening alignment with Russian President Vladimir Putin was another deterrent. Since then, the bank has had to take on increasingly expensive debt to service old borrowings and stay current with its own liquidity requirements. When it took out a $1.25 billion bond in April, its first since the Russian invasion, it was nearly 5 times as expensive as its previous borrowing. So long story short, let's take a look at this whole story. First of all, the whole thing started with a tweet from the Russian embassy in Kenya, and then Russia Today did a video about that tweet, and then Western media outlets did articles about that video that was about that tweet. It was circular reporting. It was really just a tweet. Yes, BRICS countries are buying a lot of gold, but then again, so are Western countries buying gold. It's just a good decision. That doesn't mean they're about to launch a gold-backed currency. All the reasons the U.S. got off the gold standard are applicable to reasons why the BRICS countries can't go on the gold standard now, and the very bank that BRICS created for the purpose of dethroning the dollar is saying they are not going to launch a common currency anytime soon, and they are now more dependent on the dollar than they have ever been. And it is for all of these reasons that the price of gold is not moving off of this story, because gold traders are not buying it. They don't believe this is going to happen. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm saying it's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen overnight. It probably won't happen in August. And even if it does happen, I have zero confidence that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping or any of the other government leaders in the BRICS countries who all subscribe to Keynesian economics won't make the same stupid mistakes that caused the United States to fail the gold standard. Gold standard didn't fail in the United States. The United States failed the gold standard. We're all paying the price for that now. But I am not going to let that dissuade me from buying physical precious metals like gold or silver, because that is still the best way to protect your wealth from the Keynesian imbeciles that run the global financial system. And until next time, live small and dream big.